Welcome to Late Set News Blaster. As the ceremony continued after James Redford's stunning tribute that shook the hearts of all present, more moments unfolded that made Robert Redford's funeral not only a farewell, but a living testament to the impact he had on countless lives. And while James' words still echoed in the air, other family members, including grandchildren, stood silently near the front row, some holding hands, some wiping away tears, as if silently carrying the torch of the Redford family legacy. And the atmosphere remained so heavy with emotion that many guests later admitted they had never felt such a strong blend of grief and admiration in a single setting. Speeches by close friends painted an intimate portrait of Robert's character behind closed doors, describing how he was always a mentor, a listener, and a man who never let his fame distance him from those who needed guidance. And one story shared by a lifelong friend about Robert personally helping a struggling actor get his first break reminded the audience that generosity was not a publicity stunt for him, but a core part of his personality. And the audience erupted once again in a wave of tears and clapping, realizing that the image of Robert Redford as a movie star was only a fraction of who he truly was. For his humanitarian work, his environmental activism, and his quiet acts of kindness had built a parallel legacy that James had beautifully echoed in his tribute. In fact, after James's words were read, many reflected on how rare it was to hear such a genuine connection between father and son, in a world where Hollywood families are often broken apart by fame and pressure. And that authenticity carried the funeral into sacred territory where the boundary between grief and inspiration seemed to vanish, leaving behind a collective awareness that Robert Redford had given the world more than movies. He had given the world himself, unfiltered and real, and this realization led to a moment when the entire hall stood in silence, bowing heads as a violin softly played Amazing Grace. While Robert's portrait glowed on a large screen beside the coffin, the silence was broken only by the soft sobs of mourners, and the moment ended with a ripple of applause that once again affirmed the sense that Robert's life story would not fade away but continue to inspire generations. Afterwards, the funeral shifted into a reflective celebration, where clips of Robert's career, from his earliest breakout roles to his later directorial masterpieces, were played, reminding everyone that his art was timeless, and that the man who once fought to bring independent cinema into the mainstream had succeeded in creating a platform where creativity thrived beyond the studio system. And watching these clips through tears, the audience felt as if they were being invited to witness Robert's journey one last time, guided not just by film reels but by the voice of his late son, who had already declared him not only an actor, but a father and a friend. And that blend of personal and professional remembrance gave the funeral an extraordinary power that is rarely seen. When the time finally came for the coffin to be carried out, the sight of pallbearers dressed in black coats slowly lifting it and leading the way under a sky that had turned grey with clouds made the moment unforgettable. And many whispered that even the heavens seemed to mourn. Yet the soft release of doves outside symbolized that his spirit was free, leaving behind not emptiness, but an unshakable legacy. And as fans gathered at the gates holding candles, singing softly, and raising photographs of the actor, the world realized that Robert Redford had achieved the rarest of endings, leaving this world not in silence, but in a chorus of love, memory and tribute, with his son James's words forever echoing as the ultimate reminder of the bond that even death cannot break. Even after the official service ended, the atmosphere around Robert Redford's funeral lingered in a way that seemed timeless, as though no one present wanted to leave the sacred space where love, memory and legacy had blended into one. And in the quiet corners of the hall, guests could be seen embracing each other, some recalling personal stories of meeting Robert during his decades of work in cinema and activism, while others reflected on how James Redford's tribute had changed their perception of the actor entirely. For the words of a son who had already passed away carried a haunting yet beautiful message that death cannot silence love. The visual of Robert's photograph framed beside the coffin remained etched in the minds of everyone who attended, and the moment the coffin was carried outside, followed by mourners dressed in black coats with bowed heads, it became a sight of cinematic magnitude, almost as if life itself was giving Robert the kind of farewell his films always captured, poignant, larger than life, yet deeply human. As the soft rain began to fall, the crowd outside held candles under umbrellas, their flames flickering but never extinguishing, a symbol of how Robert's light would continue burning in the hearts of his admirers. And when the doves were released, The sound of their wings flapping against the grey sky reminded everyone that this was not an ending but a continuation, a passing of wisdom and artistry to the next generation. Whispers spread through the crowd of how Robert had always said that stories are the soul of humanity, and in that moment it became clear that his own story had now become part of global memory, not locked in Hollywood archives, but alive in human hearts. And as people slowly dispersed, many turned back one last time to look at the hall, as if reluctant to accept that a man who gave them so much had truly gone. Yet James's stunning tribute played in their minds like a final reel, assuring them that Robert Redford's greatest role was not in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, or The Sting, but in being a father whose love, lessons and spirit would remain eternal. And so the world left the funeral not only grieving but inspired, determined to carry forward the values of authenticity, humility and humanity that Robert himself embodied until his very last day. As night began to fall, after Robert Redford's funeral, the emotions stirred earlier in the day did not fade, but instead deepened into an atmosphere of collective reflection. For while the official service had ended, those who had gathered could not easily walk away from the overwhelming sense of history that had just unfolded before their eyes, and many lingered outside the hall, speaking softly in groups, their faces illuminated by the candles they still held. Reluctant to let the flames die out just as they were reluctant to let go of Robert's memory, people spoke about how unusual it was for a Hollywood figure to inspire not only admiration for talent, but respect for integrity, recalling that Robert had turned down countless roles that did not align with his values, had sacrificed personal opportunities in order to protect the environment, and had chosen to invest in people and communities, rather than in self-indulgence. And in the quiet of that evening, James Redford's tribute remained the centerpiece of conversation, for those words had pierced deeper than any headline or film scene could, reminding the world that at the heart of all the fame and recognition was a father and a son whose love had endured hardships, loss and distance, yet emerged as something eternal. Even those who had never personally known Robert left the funeral feeling as though they had lost a mentor or a friend. Such was the power of the moment, and as the news spread across the globe, millions who had watched his films or read about his activism joined in collective mourning online, filling social media with tributes, old movie posters, and personal notes of gratitude, proving that Robert's influence reached far beyond the industry, touching ordinary people who found hope and inspiration in his life. Meanwhile, fellow actors and directors who had once worked with him gave interviews reflecting on how Robert always insisted on honesty in performance, often telling young actors that truth mattered more than perfection, and those lessons became the very ethos of their careers, making it clear that his impact was not confined to the screen, but was woven into the craft of cinema itself. And as the night drew darker, the image of Robert's coffin being carried out, accompanied by the release of white doves against a stormy sky, continued to haunt those who had witnessed it, a symbolic scene that many described as a cinematic farewell, written not by Hollywood, but by life itself. And so the funeral transformed from a single day of grief into a lasting story, one that would be retold